The Secret Doctors of NASA is a series of memoirs, diaries, and reports from actual doctors employed by an undisclosed arm of NASA between 1970 and 2001. These writings contain true accounts of the unusual and often highly classified medical conditions experienced by astronauts during and after their space missions. Following the defunding of Clandestine Times medical program after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, these majorities of these accounts were left forgotten on tape drives in a NASA storage facility. In 2016, a former intern whose job was to clean out one of these faculties discovered them. 2 years later, he is ready to release what he found. A dentist discovery. Arnold F. DDS, August 4th, 1989. I met the astronaut after a half-year mission on the Russian space station. He'd gone through his primarily post-landing physical, but complained about pain in his jaw and gums. His health, aside from those complications, was fair. It was my job to find out what was wrong with him before moving him on to the next specialist, the urologist, I think. The order was always changing. The patient was in decent spirits when we met, although I could tell something was on his mind. We chatted for a little bit. It turned out he'd been working on the free lead discovering. My heart sank. When Bang Lee discovered what they initially called the Venus Tic Tacs in 1982, no one in the know was surprised. Just another alien organism to add to the list of hundreds. A team was formed to conduct research and determine its risks and benefits. And then there were no expectations that anything would come of it. Well, as is often the case, those in the know knew nothing. Give those Venus Tic Tacs an electric shock in the right place for the right amount of time, and what do you get? Pluripotent stem cells. They had the potential to be a game changer in the field of regenetic medicine. I don't think anyone expected to discover them when we did. All the data we have shown were at the last decade away from introducing pluripotency. Hell, we even assumed civilian doctors might figure them out first. This was big. Capital B. In dentistry, it meant we might be able to regrow missing teeth and reverse jaw deterioration. I followed the studies with great interest. The animal tests were successful. New teeth, better jaws, nice smiles all around. Great, good, and very successful. The researchers moved on to human subjects. Failing. Nothing. Zitch. No reason. No goddamn reason whatsoever. No one could figure out why there were 100% successes with the animal subjects and 0% with people. The stem cells wouldn't grow at all. Then a doctor named Francisco T., who'd been there on the team since the beginning, suggested that they tried using the Tic Tac cells on people in space. He didn't give a reason, and I don't think he had one. It was probably something like, well, fuck it. It doesn't work here, so let's try it up there. So we did, and it worked. Sort of. The effects were different for everyone. Sometimes, capillaries were repaired. Sometimes, jawbones grew again. Then again, sometimes teeth fell out, and jaws collapsed. That's what happened to Joe. No one wanted to use the Venus Tic Tacs again. That's why, when the astronauts came to me with pain in his gums and jaws and told me he had been working on the Fang Lee discovery, I was less than thrilled with what I'd found. There'd been a 6-year memorialization on the Venus Tic Tac human experiments since the Joe's incident. It had been only lifted a year ago. Apparently, someone on the team wanted to pick it up right where they left off. While I talked to the astronaut, He informed me that he had been new to the research on the Tic Tacs. I frowned, and I told him I wasn't aware of anything new. He filled me in. Apparently, there had been some civilian advantages in the stem cell technology that ended up contributing to our own knowledge of the science. New experiments were drawn up, plausibility was determined, and one of the team leaders impressed the brass at NASA's ethics division. That, combined with the limited number of Venus Tic Tacs that had been recovered and the unnecessarily surrounding how much longer they'd live, ended the moratorium. That was all well and good at this point. I still had looked outside the astronaut's mouth before we'd started chatting. I had my assistant do some x-rays of his jaw, then developed while we talked. Now, they were ready. I'm gonna digress for a second. Have you ever seen what a child's skull looks like before their adult teeth come in? It's unsettling. Look at this. This was all us at some point. I've been a dentist for the last 36 years. I've dealt with a lot of crazy stuff, but just thinking about those holes make me uneasy. Some things just stick with you, I guess. Why am I mentioning this? This astronaut, this grown man, has what looks like new teeth forming above his adult ones. I've consulted with the x-rays we took before his mission. There was nothing unusual about them. Just the filled cavities and mild bone loss in his jaw that made his teeth candidate for those Tic Tac cells. Now, as I stared at this x-ray, now that I stared at this new x-ray, I saw the cavities were still there. His jaw was just decaying. It was those dark smudges on the x-ray indicated new teeth deep in there. I'd never seen anything like it. I remained professional. I asked him to lean back and open his mouth so I could begin the examination. As soon as I took my first look, I knew something was definitely wrong. His gums were puffy and bled at the slightest touch. His teeth looked gray, as if they'd never been brushed. It didn't make any sense. I swung the magnifying lens over and brightened the light. I think he heard me stifle my gasp when I looked through. His teeth were covered in infinitesimal holes. They were much smaller than regular cavities. I looked closer. Each of the holes had a tiny pink hair string out of the center. I touched it with the tip of my instrument. It recoiled back into the tooth. At this point, I was getting uneasy. I asked the astronaut if what I did hurt. He told me it did, but not badly. I decided to numb the gums around his top front teeth. While I waited for the Novocaine to take effect, I studied his molars. When I reached for those had bigger holes with thicker growths. When I reached for one of them with my instrument, rather than slipping back into the tooth, the hair extended about 1/4 of an inch and wrapped around my metal tip. The astronaut didn't seem to feel it. I gave the instrument a gentle tug. Nothing. I pulled harder, but still barely using any force, the molar came out. My patient gasped, and I apologized profusely. I stopped what I was doing and put the instrument on the tooth out of the line of sight. I decided to level him. I told him there was some severe damage to his teeth, and I didn't know what it was. I said I needed to do more explanatory work, and it would be likely be very uncomfortable. The astronaut did his best to take in stride. He told me he knew something was very, very wrong from the moment he was brushing his teeth on the space station, and the bristles would get caught inside of the holes. Then, that made me shudder. Anyway, I numbed his mouth the best I could and got to work. By the end of it, I'd accidentally caused 9 of his teeth to fall out. All that remained in their place were those bizarre pink hairs. I sent him back with a brace with the appointment for the next day. I told him I was going to remove the rest of his teeth. I felt terrible for that guy. I got a call in the middle of the night from the head of medicine at the NASA hospital. I came there right away. The astronaut's roommate had called in emergency services about an hour ago. He was excruciating pain and bleeding from the mouth. I arrived at the hospital 10 minutes later. I expected to be able to go right into the room and see the patient, but I was stopped by security and the head of medicine. He instructed me to put on a clean room suit. Right then, I knew something was deeply wrong. I donned the suit and followed the head into one of the 2 observation areas above the hermetically sealed operation room. I looked at one of the television screens showing the astronaut's mouth. My stomach churned. All of the man's teeth had fallen out. In their place, growing out of his gaps, bloody gums, were spiraling tangles of the pink hairs. I watched as the surgeon grasped one of the tangles in a pair of forceps and pulled and pulled. One of the doctors held the astronaut's head while the surgeon put his weight into the effort. With the sound of a heavy piece of brush being torn from the ground, the tangles gave way. They arrived at the end of the forceps, the one still in his mouth stretched out as if they were trying to take the other one away and bring it back. The surgeon dropped the vinyl cloth onto the bowl and the camera zoomed in on it. At the top of the tangles, there was something solid. Something that I recognized. Looked very much like one of those new teeth deep inside the astronaut's jawbone. I seen it on the x-rays that afternoon. Now, out of the exposed in the light, I saw it wasn't a tooth at all. It was a brand new Venus Tic Tac. The first we'd seen discovered outside of the Venus Terramoniite. So the issue of the proponent stem cells and whether or not they'll benefit human subjects is still a mystery. And after hours of surgery, my patient is in a coma. As a human being, I write this in heavy heart. As a scientist, though I have some hope, maybe even a little excitement, thanks to that poor astronaut. Now we know how to breed new Venus Tic Tacs. Perhaps someday we'll learn how to use them. End of report.